By default, when the application is running, the only thing you can change in an MVC app is the view. Like you can go in and mess around with your controller code, but you are going to get errors. You're going to see errors until you stop the running application. So that's just something that you have to remember. The only thing it's going to let you change is the view. And another warning, and we've mentioned this before, but a lot of times people will make typos when they create their projects. So they come in here and they're like, oh, I'm going to rename this. Um, remember that it uses the name of the project for the namespace. And if you change that name, you have to change the namespace reference in all of your pages. So, if you made a typo, it's probably best just to live with it if you can, instead of trying to find all those occurrences. Looking at our home controller. The home controller starts with a bunch of using statements because it's pulling in information from ASP.NET Core. It's got the model namespace. So if we did create a model defining how our data is going to be stored, we can actually connect to the database and pull in data and store it in the model. And that's why that's up there. And then we have some system diagnostics that we can use for errors. Then we've got the namespace with our app name.controllers. And then below that, you can see that the home controller is derived from the controller class. All controllers derive from the controller class. Okay, so that is, in the future, you will be creating additional controllers, and that is where they are derived from. You'll notice that we have an iLogger method, and that is basically for error handling. And then we have a couple action result methods. An iAction result is basically used when you want to connect with a view. There are other types of action methods, but to start with, pretty much you're going to be using iAction result because when we come into the controller, we do want it to connect to a view. And so the name of the action method corresponds to the name of the Razor page that it displays. That is a convention. Okay, so we are in the home controller. That corresponds to the home view directory. Okay, and then we've got index and privacy, and those correspond to the index Razor page and the privacy Razor page, which are both views. So when the index action method is executed, it goes to the index view. And when the privacy action method is executed, it goes to the privacy view. By default, it's going to run through the index action method. And we've talked about this before, but that default is defined in Program CS. Just as a little refresher, map controller route specifies the default. So if the user does not key in the controller/action method in the URL, they are going to automatically go to the home controller index action method. Okay, so when this first launches, nothing is keyed in. And so what it's displaying, where it went, is it went through the home controller. It automatically went through our index action method, and it went to the index view. One thing to note here is all of our action methods start with a capital I, and that is to differentiate them from a very old version of ASP.NET. The original version had action methods, um, and they were called action result. And when they came out with .NET Core, they did not want to kind of change what the methods were called, so they just put a capital I in front of them. So if you see the capital I, that's the current technology. But if you're looking at old code, you may see action result instead of I action result. And that's how you know it's old code, is because it's not using a .NET Core. Now you may wonder, is there a way to get it to route to a different view? Like, can it go through the index action method? And instead of going to the index view, can it go to something else? Yes, it can. In fact, we're going to copy the index action method, paste it right into the home directory, and I'm going to call this CIT218. Hopefully, try to rename. Oh, let me, you can't do any of that when it's running. See, I forget sometimes too. So now I'm going to rename it. All right. So I got it renamed and I'm looking at the 218. Right now it's identical to index. Basically, it's got view data, title equals homepage. I'm going to change that to CIT218 rocks. So this is what you're going to see on the browsers tab and whatever you've entered in there. Then we've got a div section that we're centering. Class equal text center is Bootstrap. H1, we've got classes display for, that is Bootstrap sizing. And instead of welcome, it's going to say web apps. And then we're going to add a little paragraph below that that just says web apps are awesome. All right, so that is our 218 page. We've made it now different than the index. So let's go into the home controller. And instead of routing to the index, which is what this does by default, in parentheses here for view, we're going to tell it to go to CIT218 instead. Okay? And now when we run this, it's still going to come in through the home controller and index, but instead of going to the index view, it's going to go to our new CIT218 view. And how do I know it did it right? Well, I look up on the tab and I can see CIT218 rocks. So we know that it went to our new one. Now, what if we want to also have the ability to go to the regular index? Okay, so what if we want it to go to either one? Okay, because we have them both set up, right? So what if we wanted the ability to go to either one of those? Then we need to modify the code a little bit. If you remember, when we looked at map controller route, there's an ID, an optional ID at the end. This is a parameter, and we can add a parameter to our entry string, and we can read that parameter into the program. And we're going to use that to determine if it should go to 218 or index. And that means we have to change our action method, our index action method, just a little bit. And we're going to change this to bring in a string ID. And we're going to store that ID in a variable I'm calling CView. And then we're going to check it. We're going to see if it contains, we're going to have them key in CIT. If they've entered CIT, then we're going to have them go to CIT 218. But if they do not enter anything, then we are going to route them to the default, which is index. Okay, so now we are giving them the ability to go to either one. So let me save this, and we're going to run it. And the first time it runs, because we did not give it CIT, it has gone to our, regular index view. If we want it to go to CIT, we have to tell it the home controller, index, and CIT. And if we tell it that, it goes to our new view. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and stop that. Now we're going to copy this, because this is one way we could accomplish it. But there is a better way to do this. So I'm going to change this original index back to its default. Okay, so that was the way it was when we started. And I'm going to do a new action result method for CIT 218. Okay, so we've got action results, CIT 218, and we're going to return view. So how does this work? Well, let me save this, and I will show you. Okay, so it's still going to index by default. If we want it to go to CIT 218, then we do /home/CIT 218. And it takes us to that page. Okay, so it's the same thing as if we wanted to go to privacy, right? We just key in privacy, takes us to that page, go to index, will take us to that page. So we're basically keying in the action method name here. And I'm going to stop that. So you may wonder, do all controller methods have to go to views? No, they do not. You could have a controller method actually go to a different method, or you can have it display a string, okay, or anything that you want. For simplicity, I think we're going to have it display a string. And I'm just going to copy this one in here. And so I've got what it's returning is a string. And you'll notice what these other ones are returning are action results because they're going to views. But this is just going to display a string. Okay, and I'm calling it my index. And what it's going to display, I'll throw my name in here, is Lisa's awesome index. Very exciting. Okay, so this is not routing to a view. It is just going to be displaying the string. So let's run this. Okay, so again, by default, it goes to home and index. And then if I want it to go to my index, I have to enter the name of the controller, home, and my index. And there it is. Okay, if I go to back, I can do home and CIT 218 still. Okay, I can do home index, home privacy, and now I can do home and my index. Now, because my index is displaying a string, okay, it is not going to a view. So we don't have that nice navigation when we display the string. In order to get this nice little navigation, you got to go through the view. Okay, so running everything through a view is part of our user interface, and that is a convention, and it is also a standard.